If I were writing a gospel about Owen, I'd be sure to include stories about outdoor activities. Skiing, camping, and hiking are very important to him.
If I were writing a gospel about Willem, I'd be sure to include stories about a lot of different activities. Driving a car, happiness, and spending time with family.
If I were writing a gospel about Hannah, I would include swimming, singing, and gelato.
If I were writing a gospel about Eric, I would be sure to include playing the piano and the saxophone. Playing musical instruments make him happy.
If I were writing a gospel about Savian, I'd be sure to talk about how she likes horseback riding and she wants to go to Greece. She likes to play with bunnies and she likes hanging out with friends.
If I were writing a gospel about Campbell, I would make sure to include singing, dancing, and hanging out with her friends.
Ada's gospel would be about how she loves to be outside with her dog Zinnia and how she loves playing soccer.
When Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John wrote Gospels about Jesus, they included stories that they wanted us to remember, stories they believe would tell us something important about who Jesus is.
When Matthew wrote his gospel about Jesus, he told stories about Jesus' Jewish background and identity. He often used passages from the Old Testament to describe Jesus and his ministry. Showing Jesus' closeness to Judaism was really important to Matthew.
When Luke told stories about Jesus, he made sure to show how Jesus welcomed all people, even children, even women, and even tax collectors and sinners.
When Mark wrote his gospel about Jesus, he thought it was important to include stories about how Jesus challenged the status quo. He even went into the temple and turned over the table of the money changers. That made people mad.
John thought it was important to show that Jesus was the Word of God. John uses lots of symbols to describe Jesus: bread, water, light, life, word, shepherd, doorway.
Of course, the Gospels don't always agree on what stories about Jesus are most important.
They sure don't. Look, here they come now.
The angel of the Lord appeared to Mary.
Wait a minute. The angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream.
Jesus was born in a barn, a lowly stable.
A barn? You talking cows and chickens? Jesus descended straight from King David.
Shepherds came to visit him when he was a baby.
The shepherds? It was wise men from the east.
Break it up, break it up.
Who cares where he was born? Jesus came to tell us that the kingdom of heaven was very near.
Gentlemen, there is no need to squabble over details. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God.
What's he talking about?
You lost me at gentlemen.
John likes to get a little philosophical.
Yeah, he likes to show off that Greek education.
But his gospel is very beautiful, you must admit.
Oh, wait. Oh, yeah. And he does know stories about Jesus that none of us knew.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sometimes, though, the Gospel writers agree with each other.
We do?
We do? Yes, sometimes you all tell the same story almost exactly the same way.
We do?
We do?
Yes, remember the story of when Jesus fed 5,000 people with only 5 loaves and 2 fish?
Remember how everyone ate until they were satisfied?
Yes, that's right. There were 5,000 people.
And only 5 loaves and 2 fish.
But when everyone had eaten their fill, there were 12 baskets left over.
Jesus told his disciples, "Gather up the fragments so that nothing may be lost."
And that's what the gospel writers did too. They gathered up the fragments of Jesus' life and ministry so that nothing would be lost.
And they passed their baskets of stories down to us. We share them so that we can remember who Jesus is. I remember Jesus was born in a manger.
I remember Jesus. I remember that 3 wise men followed a bright star to give him gifts.
I remember Jesus. I remember Jesus as the Holy One.
I remember Jesus. One thing I remember about Jesus is that he is symbolized by a lamb.
I remember Jesus. I remember how Jesus had disciples who carried his teachings even after he died.
I remember Jesus. I remember learning that Jesus converted Saul because Saul was persecuting Christians, and Jesus changed Saul's name to Paul.
I remember Jesus. I remember Jesus as a teacher, spreading the message of kindness and acceptance, and I learned this through the stories of the gospel.
How do
How do
you
you remember Jesus? Who is Jesus for you?